Well, happy day. And you are here in the sunshine. How's it feel? Cold still. But the sun is here. And speaking of sunshine, we have wonderful artist with us today. And Judy Rush is with the curator, Eliza Ho, who discovered Judy and Michael Halliday. Yeah. And, you know, I love your commentary, Eliza, on the adjacent play, as Judy and Michael have playfully presented this beautiful work. They still remain independent of one another. And I thought, from your statement, I watched children play in the snow 2 days ago, and they were quite independent, having a wonderful time doing snow angels, all the things you can do with the snow people. And they're looking at each other like, how do you like this? How do you like that? The interplay in the dance was beautiful, and so is yours. I said to Judy, now I know in your commentary you say we can roll around in some of the wonderful works. Judy said, well, I didn't bring those, so I'm glad I didn't hop into one of those bowls this morning. Beautiful. Well, Judy Rush, you are presently as an adjunct professor at Columbus College of Art and Design. And as you work with the students, what comes to your mind and heart?
Oh. That's a hard one. Oh, that's a hard one because they're frustrating and delightful all in the same moment. So, but I think their inquisitive nature about the fiber itself and what the reaction to the fiber is, just the basic bare bone fiber is pretty interesting.
And where did you study as you?
I went to UMass Textile Design and
You hear that?
Textile Design at UMass and my master's degree at Ohio State in art education. I worked with Chuck Surrey, which is interesting in that Chuck Surrey was not my advisor, but a guy working under him was his advisor. So I worked quite closely with Chuck. Now they call him Charles, but I call him Chuck. And we called him Chuck back then too. And then it's interesting because when Michael was in undergraduate school, he was working with Chuck Surrey as well, and he refers to him as Chuck as well. So everybody in modern time calls him Charles for sure. He's a big name in art in Columbus.
And as Judy, you came to know Eliza, how is it that you connected by what? You're discovering the work of Judy?
I discovered Judy through my husband. I remember one time that Judy came into my office, so we happened to have our offices in 400 West Ridge, you know, just 2 minutes down here, you know, in Franklinton. And I think my office, so my husband is an architect, and I studied artistry, and my graduate work was done at OSU, you know, for artistry and modern art. And but then we have our own business, you know, doing a lot of restaurant designs and residential projects and things like that. And our office is at 400 West Ridge, and Judy's office in, you know, studio is at 400 West Ridge. And one time my husband had some computer problem, and Judy, you know, graciously, you know, just very, you know, kindly came into my office to help out something. And that's how I came to know Judy as a person, not as an artist in the first place. But then, you know, as the conversation goes on, you know, of course we'll touch upon, you know, the stuff that we are passionate about. And slowly we kind of like discover Judy's artwork. And as the conversation goes, you know, a relationship grow is kind of like, you know, it's very organically grow, the relationship. And, you know, very recently, and Judy also mentor my children, my 2 children in the summer, you know, teaching them how to, you know, make ropes and how to felt. So, you know, I feel it is, you know, relationship is something like that, that, you know, it started out with a small thing, and then it kind of grow bigger and bigger, and then you see more potential in it. And it's kind of like a nice metaphor of, you know, Judy's work, kind of like she expand her, you know, her capacity and also the artistic sensibility, you know, through this exhibition as well.
How exciting! How exciting! And your husband is?
He's here.
Ah, stand up, architectural artist.
That's my
Wonderful.
daughter sitting next to him.
Ah, wonderful.
She's pregnant.
Yay.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what would you like to say, Judy, since Michael Halliday is not here? How would you talk about his work, and you chime in since you're the one who brought them together, or did they come to you together?
Do you want to start?
You want to start, I think.
Okay. Well, Michael and I were just kind of friends, studio buddies. We'd talk about art. We'd go sit in the back of the 400 and by the railroad tracks, set out some chairs, and just sit and watch the trains come by and talk art. I mean, just kind of ramble on and on and on, and that's how pretty much how we got to just be friends, take a break during the middle of the day. And then we were on the same floor eventually, so that made it a little easier. And then I knew that Eliza was working with Michael in a lot of areas, and I liked the way she talked about his work. I just liked the influence of her words into what he was doing. Whether he responded to it or not was a different thing, but I certainly responded to her comments. So I wanted some of that. So in all honesty, I think I finagled this. I may not have finagled this trio, but I think I did, so whatever. But it's really been an interesting working arrangement. Eliza's very organized, very to the point, and writes well, and I am none of those things. So I really appreciate that level of interest and experience and willingness to do that work in order to help us just be able to do the artwork. And then she just put the show together. She took what we had and just put the show together. So I don't know how many of you have put a show together, but to do all the marketing, to do all the design of the show, to do all the interaction with the format that you're having the show in the format, in this case would be the Cultural Arts Center, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of brain work that, as an artist, I don't want to really delve into. I just want to go to the art part and leave all those wordy things, you know, for someone else.
You know,
So
I want to say, too,
really
you
grateful.
danced with Mother Nature and had to cancel the opening. So now you're with the Groundhogs on February 2nd.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, for the opening.
So I can talk a little bit more about, you know, the curatorial process of this exhibition. My husband and I have always been a big fan of this space. You know, architecturally, you know, we think it is one of the best art gallery in Columbus. The ceiling heights, you know, all the historical characters of the building, and also, you know, it's just the accessibility of this building. You know, it's open to all, and, you know, it's open, you know, 6 days throughout the week, and it's very welcoming. And I also like that it has the built-in audience, you know, of this building. You have classes going on all the time. The energy is just so much. You know, we love the variety of this building. And personally, when you know, I've always been, you know, I've been with as a good friend with Michael Halliday for, I would say, 6-7 years now, and I'm always a big fan of his work, you know, the artistic quality of it, and also his artistic process. From ideas to execution. I also collect some of his really small little sketches. It just gives me so much, you know, inspiration. And I'm a person who needs to connect dots. So I'm always attracted to ideas, they are done in different disciplines, but then when they are brought to a different context or bring different mediums together, I like to see the synergy of it. So I think that's how I'm attracted to Michael Halliday's work and Judy's work. You know, there are different artistic medium. You know, one is fiber. You know, one is simply paint. And you know, when you bring them together, there are a lot of surprising elements that comes out of that, you know, combination of work. So, you know, so I think in the summer when I think it's maybe like a little bit earlier when we submit for the, you know, proposal to use the art gallery here, we kind of like talk about, well, you know, how are we going to fill up the space? You know, that, you know, Judy thought, well, you know, these small little, you know, creatures, you know, it might be really hard, you know, to this space. But then we think about Michael's work, you know, it's this oversized painting, you know, 72 by 72 inches. It will be a great, you know, great kind of addition to this gallery. So we thought, well, maybe we can bring something interesting together. I think, you know, the whole idea is started out because of the big difference between Judy's work and Michael's work. Oh, one big and one small. How do we bring them together? And as we talk more and more, I think that it's really the sensibility that brings the two artists together, and also the process when they create. You know, like Judy was saying that, you know, there are a lot of conversation that between Michael and, you know, Judy in their leisure time. You know, I think this is one of the things, you know, for artists and, you know, for architect, for designer as well. We work not at a certain hour. You know, our brain is always, you know, churning and turning. We are looking for inspiration all the time. I think that's the outcome of this show is really a lot of thinking and a lot of inspiration, and we don't necessarily have a very clear idea what the outcome will look like. We just kind of like, you know, go as it develops. So, you know, when we were talking with, you know, the manager here, you know, Tom, and when we had a meeting with Jeff and Todd here, we suddenly realized that, you know, in that space, you know, as you walk in from the front, you know, that corridor space, in fact, there is a scaffolding or, you know, something from hanging from the ceiling that we can hang some work from, you know, from the top. And all of a sudden, you know, I make the connection. Well, Judy has a lot of bowls, and when you know, think about bowls are supposed to be sitting on something, you know, like that. But what if we actually hang it from the ceiling and turn it upside down, and, you know, create that, you know, in a different angle, and to create an installation of that? What would it be like? You know, so we are thinking from a experience, you know, point of view to see, you know, to think about, well, as a viewer who come in, as they walk through, you know, like the space, what's the experience is going to be like? So I think that's kind of like change our perspective from the idea of how are we going to fill the gallery to a more experiential, you know, experience that we want to create, you know, in this gallery. So, so that's, you know, part of the curatorial process.
Wonderful. Well, how about Judy walking us through this experience that you just beautifully described?
Do you want to get up and walk through the bowls?
Do you want to do that? Yeah. Exactly.
You want to go through the, on the other side, we walk among these exquisite bowls.
Also, just kind of feel what it feels like to be underneath that. Pay attention to just the way you feel underneath them. Okay, this is my little planetary endeavor. People have said, oh, they remind me of jellyfish. And it's pretty interesting because my son lives in LA. He has a season pass to the aquarium out there, so we spend a lot of time at the aquarium. And they have an excellent jellyfish display. So that's, people are referring to these as jellyfish. It's not a surprise to me because it's certainly in my awareness. But I'm interested in, as you're walking around these bowls and walking in them and walking around them and walking under them, I think each bowl kind of has its own personality, and I think there is a certain amount of energy actually coming off of those bowls, and each one has a little bit of different information in it. So if you kind of just sit with them for a minute, you can kind of experience the different energies inside the bowl and outside the bowls. Yeah, just like these three kids are doing.
I have the microphone here if anyone wants to comment.
That's the point. And when it's dark outside, you can see the light coming through and it reflecting off the side in a little different way. She won't speak?
Oh, I have to speak. Judy, I have a question. How do you make the round shapes?
I put them on a balloon, a giant balloon.
Okay. Oh. I pictured a yoga ball.
I know, but the yoga balls have ridges in them, so you would get that ridge in there. I'm going to go to that next. I'm going to get shapes with textures in them and see how that affects the felt. But I just wanted a smooth inside, smooth, flat inside.
You do one coat and then you...
No, I lay it out flat, so I have a 48 by 48 inch sheet of semi-felted fiber, right? So it's really loose, it can still come apart, but it's workable. And then I lay it over the balloon and pretty much drape it over the balloon, cut the fabric off, sew it together, and then I felt it some more so it gets into more felted.
So how do you get the two-color process?
And so I just cut it and sew it together. These are all seams.
Okay.
So I just sew it on there. So
Okay.
right, here's a good one. You can see this seam here.
So you don't have
Yes, the
two-sided
roving is
felted,
hand-dyed.
right? You have
No.
No.
I lay a layer of fiber, and then I lay another layer of fiber, and then I lay a third layer of fiber.
Were you expecting it to be transparent or translucent?
I was trying to figure out what I could do and how I could manage a very thin layer of felt. And what did
The
that
light's
mean?
great. The light's
Yeah,
great.
and then as I got further into the process, I was unable to pull off such thin sheets of fiber, so I just started to see what would happen to this process when I made them a little thicker.
As Judy was talking about the process of felting, I found that metaphorically beautiful. When she mentioned about, so Barbara was asking, oh, do you have two sheets of, fabric to kind of lay over one another? And then Judy was saying that, no, it is like fiber by fiber, and then you felt them together and become one piece. It's a beautiful metaphor as a society that different pieces of the fiber come together, and then you create, these kind of diverse, and none of them are, the same kind of bowl, and it just make it so, so beautiful, like aesthetically, and also, from a metaphor standpoint. So when Judy was explaining and showing me, and I, also participate in the process of felting, I just learned so much about not only the artistic, not only the technical part, but also, how we can talk about art from a, from a broader standpoint. How do we give meaning to it?
Each fiber is just a very thin, maybe thin, for these, they're about maybe 6 inches long, each fiber. And they're fragile, you can break them, right? Just the individual fibers. So, but we wear clothing, we're wearing clothing, hi Ben, we're wearing clothing of, made of fiber, and each fiber is very weak, but you put them all together, and we have strength. So there literally is strength in numbers. And I'm, quite frankly, very happy to talk about this at this point in time, because I think that what's going on in this country is a problem, and we're hurting a lot of people, a lot of innocent people, and to be able to actually work in an area where we can take individual fragile items and put them together in a group and create strength, to me, is empowering. So that's what I like about this fiber art.
What type of fiber is this?
Wool, 100% wool.
Is there any synthetic?
No. Some of it has silk in it, but that's it.
Yeah.
What does it look like when you just start? Is it just a piece of wool?
Oh, I was
Everybody
going to
hear that
bring some of
question?
that in, but I thought, oh, it's not a show and tell. But it's roving. So if you, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Unspun yarn. Does that make sense? Do you understand what unspun yarn looks like before it's spun? Spinning actually adds strength to the fiber. So.
Do you dye your own?
This is all hand dyed. Do you think you get colors like this from a store-bought anything? It just doesn't happen, right? You need to
All of
change the
nature is
colors.
kind of asleep. You bring out all these colors. It's just wonderful to stand among them. Tell us a little about how it is and you don't have these pieces with us here, how do you roll around in them?
I made giant felted bowls, and the idea was another community event. I partially felt those bowls, and people get into them and finish the felting process with their body heat, the agitation from rolling around, and the moisture from their body. And it actually worked. So it was in a relatively, it was held together so people could get in it and move around in it, but it was, you know, not felted all the way, and now they are.
Was it wet at the time?
No,
Really?
yeah, it was a pretty interesting experiment, and that's how I kind of got going on this thing.
So
So
the Groundhog's Day, the reception.
we'll have the bowls
So
there.
come on February 2nd, 6 to 8 p.m.
Right.
and see one of those bowls.
Two,
Oh.
maybe three.
Maybe three. with
Maybe
the,
a new one that's not felted yet.
With the Como Modern Dance Troupe going to be showing us.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really pretty cool. It's like beyond my wildest imagination. It really was. Oh, yeah.
Can I ask a question about your wool again?
Yeah.
My daughter raises sheep in Idaho, and do you have a particular kind of wool you like? Do you get them from?
Oh, I like all kinds of wool, but I generally, for this kind of massive amount of work, I go for the cheapest and the best blend of a merino and other things. So that's pretty much what I work in. And then a friend of mine has sheep in Granville, and I take her fleeces as well. So, but that's a blue fleece in Leicestershire, so it has a different texture on the surface. It creates a different texture on the surface of the felt. So it's more bubbly.
Do you do your own carding of the wool? Or do you
I have a carder, and a carder is just a tool that has prongs on a big, what do I call it, not a wheel, but a big drum on one end and a drum on the other end, and a smaller drum in front of it. So when you roll the raw fiber through, it kind of lines up all the fibers and then creates a bat about this big.
Do you use that for mixing the fibers?
And I also use it to mix colors. It does a great job of mixing colors. And that's also another interesting thing. When I was in graduate school, I was in computer graphics research group with Chuck Surrey. That's what he was running. And it's not called that anymore. But we were doing a lot of work with pixels and, you know, turning a pixel on and a pixel off in order to generate design. This was back in 1980. So, you know, we were really working at a pixel level. We didn't have any of these software products. We were creating all these software products to do this. So the interesting thing about fiber is exactly the same way. When I put two colors of a red and a green right next to each other and I back away from it, I'm not going to see that red and green anymore. I'm going to see the mixture of those two colors, yet when I get up on it, I'll see the colors. And there's some mixtures in some of these things that if you look really closely, you can see them. Or maybe not, because, you know, when the felt mixes together, all the three layers, they kind of look like a mixture. So I can find it because I know what it looks like. But it's you know, when you stand away from a pixelated screen and you change the color of one pixel, it changes the image. I mean, your eye notices that. So I think it's really interesting, the color of one fiber next to the color of another fiber. Not yarn, just those little tiny fibers. I think that's pretty cool.
This one seems to have a sparkle effect at the top. What do you think?
Ah.
Is it just the lighting today?
Well, I put a hardener on them. Oh, I see. And the hardener is just glycerin and gelatin. Gelatin is a material derived from bovine cow, and then the hardener leaves some material in it, and it's been reflecting. So that was something I was concerned about, but I kind of like it in the light. I like that. But there's other issues that are going on that I'm not going to tell you about that I was really concerned about. I had some very excellent advice on not to get rid of it.
Yeah, the other thing I found fascinating is that Judy's methodology, or the method of making this fiber and mixing those colors. So typically we will understand abstract artists, or abstract, painter. They work in a very spontaneous way, right? It's not super calculated or have a drawing or that kind of stuff. Judy, even though the work looks like very spontaneous and very expressionistic, but it's a lot of mathematical calculation and scientific mixture. When I see that how many percentage of this color and that kind of mixture, I see it on her wall, and I just realized that no, these look like spontaneous artwork. Actually, is a lot of calculation and a lot of different methodology that goes into it. That I also found that very interesting.
Well, you revealed she's good on computers.
Oh, she is.
Well,
great.
I maintain
know.
local area networks as a job for my health insurance, so I know a lot about computers. Don't ask me to answer the phone. I can't do that very well. But I can fix your computer.
For your bowl there with the starscape in
This
it.
one?
Yeah, are those asterisks, whatever we want to call them, felted in, or are they painted after the fact?
No painting was done
painting.
after the
Okay,
fact.
so-
Everything is felted in. And I pre-felt the stars, cut them out so they maintain their shape, and then I felt them into the rest of the work. And those stars, I went to Egypt a number of years ago with my sister, whose father-in-law is Egyptian. So we had the most fabulous tour, and it was right after the accident at Hatshepsut's temple, where they killed all the German people, but they kept calling it an accident over there. There was nobody there, nobody. So we got into everything. Like, we didn't even stop to eat because we had so many opportunities available to us. And one of the things we got to do is we got to go into Nefertari, not Nefertiti, Nefertari's tomb. And it had just been opened, so that the painting was still in pretty good condition. And the whole top of I get, clammy just thinking about it. The whole top of the ceiling were these stars, so that had a huge impact on me. And also, the goddess Isis is very predominant in these tombs, and that that some warring faction has decided to take on that monkey ear is really disturbing to me, So, and this was before all this stuff was going on. So I'm here to bring back Isis back. The goddess of life, the goddess of love.
Is there any way to calculate how much time you spend doing each one?
Yes, I can remake one of these bowls. If I didn't have to account for drying the fiber in a day, in about 8 to 10 hours.
Does that start with the carding of it, or?
Oh no, that starts with the fiber already dyed and ready to work. So, but I spend probably a good 2 weeks just dyeing fiber, and that's a long process because the dyeing of the fiber is a long process because as soon as you add heat, moisture, and agitation to wool, it starts to felt. So when you dye wool, you can't touch it, and it has to be dyed in boiling hot water. So you can't, as it's in the water to color, you can't even stick a spoon in there and touch it because it'll start felting right away. So, but when I felt with boiling hot water because it felt right away. So it takes a lot less work, physical work. This is physical work. I'd come home after doing this just exhausted.
Speaking
Just wiped out.
Of the dance, you're dialoguing and dancing with the fabric.
Oh,
It
yeah.
has a life of its own.
Oh yeah, absolutely it does.
Amazing.
Oh yeah.
Well, shall we
My
go
life.
and what was that, Judy?
That's my life.
Yeah. Shall we go and sit down, and there are other works that you have in the exhibition?
So the crowd to look at that piece,
And then I have to let it cool for like
Right.
12 hours.
But then
Is
you
it
can handle
possible?
it with
Then I
other
can take it
cells.
out, right. And sometimes what I do is I have these little Joseph dish pans that have a drain in the bottom of it, so I can dump it into there in a sink and let that hot water drain out, and just let the fiber only cool, and that takes a lot less time.
All right, Eliza,
I'm not
are
done
you
yet.
going to share a bit about Michael Halliday's, and
Yeah.
then Judy, we want you to continue to tell us about this work we're surrounded by. I love it.
Okay, so you're going to talk about Michael first?
Yeah, so, well, since Michael is not feeling well today, and I will be speaking from a perspective more from a viewer and, a person who study arts, and art history. And I think it's about a year or two ago, Michael started to develop a vocabulary. It's very geometrical. So as you can see that on the left-hand side, which is on your right-hand side, on that side of the wall, it is a series that he called the rectangle series. So the dominant feature of that series, of course, is, the rectangle in the middle of the canvas, right? There is one painting that Judy and I kind of spent time of talking about it. It was this year, not this year, but 2017, early that year. I think that month was, the largest women's protest in DC, and we were looking at Michael's painting, the one on the far, the first one, the pink one, with the pink background, with the white rectangle in there. So Judy started to ask me.
Certain paintings gives me certain feelings and emotions with certain colors.
Yeah.
Can you explain the emotions and
Yeah.
colors to me?
Yeah.
This has given me a lot of feelings.
That's great. That's what I want to hear. So I will share with you, our conversation of that piece, specifically the pink one. So, and Judy was talking about, well, what does it look like to you, the rectangle? And I was like, well, it looks like a door, And then we were talking about, well, is it really a door? Then is it open in or is opening out? And then we talk about, well, it's a rectangle. It could be a window, you look out or you look in, things like that. But, it's the pink color, it resonates. That the societal, environment, at that time that, women feels empowered, in that month. And, Judy obviously went to the DC, the parade and the protest. So, we strongly, feel that, wow, it really truly speak about, the gentle but then a very assertive force, that women comes together, and is the pink color that is nothing too violent, but then it opens up the world. I think that's the conversation that Judy and I were having, and Michael was more like listening to. So Michael as an artist, he is a very observant, artist. He listens and he observes a lot, and he just takes in all that in. And I haven't really have a conversation to ask him, oh, so when we talk about those stuff, how did that affect your creative process? But and then he further develops, I think the latest piece is the one, with the brown, the kind of like a golden background, this one. This is the latest one that he just recently complete. And then as we develop this show together, was in my mind that, well, how do I bring the two artists together? How do I make, how do I facilitate the collaboration between the two artists? Because I think it is still very important that, when we bring two very different artistic medium together, I want to make some connection, for the viewer to understand, and maybe opens up some other ways to look at their work. So the piece that's specifically created for this gallery, for this show, it is the one that's the blue pedestal. And then one day I was telling Michael, well, I know that the Cultural Arts Center has many pedestals, different shapes, different sizes, different heights, that stored in the basement. Well, let's go look at that. Well, it kind of like reminds me of your rectangle. And then we, the three of us went downstairs. We, kind of studied through every single pedestal. Well, which one that works, for the show, that I can create that here. And then we picked two of them, and then I, brought it back to Michael's studio and asked Michael to contemplate on the two white pedestals, kind of like, beaten pedestal. Well, Michael, think about how is it related to your two-dimensional work? And then Michael just, kind of like, just let it sit, and look at that, develop some ideas and all that. And then one day he called us up, well, Judy and Eliza, come over to my studio and look at that. And this is the blue pedestal that he painted. So if, I would encourage us, all come to see here, and kind of like walk around it. It's supposed to be, that you walk around it and experience, the pedestal. So we didn't prescribe any colors. I just asked Michael, go think about, how is it, related to your rectangle piece, and perhaps, you can do some magic to it. So I think, this rectangle kind of like give Michael some, because he has been working two-dimensionally, on the canvas, So you understand a painter, when he paints a canvas, the relationship is more like, oh, it's on eye level, then you paint it on the wall. So when it comes to painting a pedestal, obviously your posture would need to, kind of like change because of the object, it's a different thing, you put it on the floor and paint. So I think, it kind of like also represent, his gestural, paintbrush, on this pedestal. And Judy looked at that and kind of developed her felt, as the background of it. So, through this piece, which we call I Felt You Paint, which is the title of the show, I think it kind of like solidified, the essence of this show. I want the two artists to be able to create collaboratively and kind of in response to each other's sensibility. So, so Judy's, piece, the felt, here, and then we make a connection between the felt and the, the rectangle here. So we put the rectangle series kind of on the wall to kind of make that, visual association. Judy, you have, yeah. You have any, you want to share with us, how you create a felt and, in response to Michael's work?
That's fine. So this painting was definitely my inspiration. This was hanging on the wall down the hallway. So I didn't have the pedestal, and Michael was out of town, so I couldn't really go see it, but I had pictures of it. And I tend to like to work better with just the idea in my head. That seems to work even better. So I just pretty much just started making this. These are made in panels of 4, and then I put the panels together and felted them together. But these are really thin layers of felt again, and when you felt really thin layers of felt and give it some aggressive behavior, the holes in here open up, they become fragile, and I think that was the part that was so interesting about what was going on with this felt for me in particular. I never produced anything like this big. The work that I usually produce is mostly poster size, and I gotta say, I really like this. I really like the randomness of it. Next, we have other proposals for other places, and I think I might just expand on this some more and just maybe cover walls and poles or whatever, because I really like making this, and I like the way it fills the space. So, but I also want to talk a little bit about Michael. When Eliza was talking about Michael a little bit, Michael's a very sensitive man. For those of you who know him, he's so sensitive. So people are talking about being able to feel the color and having a visceral response to his paintings. I think that's just Michael, He comes out with the most sensitive answers to some questions that are just blow my mind and blow me away. So, and this painting down here of Michael's, do you want to talk about that one? That's something that's near and dear to his heart. Can you talk about that one at all?
Yes. So, as the curator for the show, so when I was talking with Michael, well, which pieces to be included in the show, I kind of like talked with him, well, should we include this flag, in the show? Because I don't necessarily see the connection in having this piece to fit in the show. But then Michael is very insistent about, well, he has to have this flag, in this show. And I was like, okay, we have to compromise that, so I'm okay, include this, flag in the show. But then I wanted to be on its own, on by itself on the wall, so that it give a, independence, presence, to this piece of painting. I can't speak about, Michael's political stance, in relation to the Palestine flag, but, he certainly is trying to, it's not planned. So a lot of time, for artists, it's like, they develop their vocabulary as they go. So he started out, so the first piece, as you walk in the gallery, the one in the front gallery, that's the first in the rectangle series. And then he develops all these other rectangles, through a period of like about 2 years. And so I think this one belongs to a later period of time, in the series of the rectangle series. So, he saw that, well, it's a rectangle. Maybe, he can actually, bring in a flat and more figurative, symbols, to the expressionistic, type of painting. So, I hope, in the reception night, that Michael is here, and then we can talk more about, the political meaning of this piece.
Good. We've talked about the rectangle pieces, the rectangles being possibly windows, being possibly doors. These rectangles could also possibly each be flags.
Yes, exactly, yes.
So symbols of some type of statement.
Right.
Yes.
I definitely think that's Michael's work. Definitely symbolic of some kind of statement.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Whatever
how about if we
painting
go
is.
back and sit down and you
Okay.
tell us more about your pieces, Judy?
Oh, okay. Well, I went to the Netherlands on a month-long residency. I was in you want me to wait till sit down?
I said, no, you went to the Netherlands.
I went to the Netherlands. And I lived on a farm for a month. Boy, that's an experience, right? I knew the woman who was hosting me. She's a friend of mine, but I did artwork the whole time I was there. I'd get up in the morning and I'd start making art, and I'd go to bed at night still making art. She thought I was going to tour the country, and I was like, no, I'm coming here to make art away from all my distractions. But she's the one who turned me on to felting, and she took me to a bunch of artist studios, other felters, and took me to a, what was it? It was a felting, some sort of gestalt, I think it was, gestalt felting course. That was like 4 years in the making. And at the end of the 4 years, you could become an art therapist, and their medium was felt. And they make all these crazy looking felted critters. What they do is they partially felt wool with a lot of soap. They don't really care about the soap amount. The amount of soap that you put into a soap acts as a lubricator, but the amount of soap that you put into it has an effect on the way it felts. So they don't care about that, because they just get it really hot, really wet, felt it a little bit, and throw the whole soapy wet thing in a dryer. And it comes out with all these different goofy kind of shapes. I don't have any of that work here. Well, this is probably a good example. This shape right in the middle of her body is just an odd shape. And then we stitched on it, and then we put these parts and pieces together. She mostly just made heads and then put other stick bodies on it or something, but I started putting felted bodies on it, and she thought that was like, oh wow, what a novel idea, make the body out of felt. It's like, but I'm a quilter. That's how I got into this world. So I do a lot of hand stitching on my quilt. My quilts are all hand stitched. This takes a lot less time. My quilts take a year for a single quilt. And these, I can do these in my leisure time and sitting in front of the TV and relax and sit on my studio and listen to music or something. It's a lot less intense as far as time involved to completion. So that's how I learned how to felt. And she was also a student of this Gestalt class for a little while, and it was too intense for her, so she dropped out. But we talk about all the implications of the beings that we're creating and what part of us is in that being. And so we made all those kinds of connections, and that was pretty much fun. But I came back to Columbus, and part of my coursework for these students is to take them through all the different parts of the fiber to fabric making processes. And they're all pretty interesting. I think it's like wildly entertaining, but they're asleep at 8 o'clock in the morning. We take them through just exploring the fiber, and then we teach them how to weave and knit and spin yarn, and then dye all the yarns and dye all the fabric and print the fabric. This is kind of the science around that a little bit for art students. And then the really interesting part that we can never get to because all those other parts take so much time is the finishing. Because all the properties and characteristics of any fiber carry through to the end product up until the point where the finishing gets put on, and then all the properties and characteristics can change. For instance, cotton is a very absorbent fabric. You can put a waterproof on there and suddenly it becomes not waterproof, changing completely the properties and characteristics of the fiber. That's wildly interesting to me. Just that I can do something that's without a hardener on here, this thing would just be flat. It'd have some structure to it, but nothing like this. So I can't wait to see where this goes. Yes, sir?
What type of hardeners do you use?
I use a mixture of glycerin, just a very little bit of glycerin in about a gallon of water to about maybe 2 cups of gelatin. So it's called bioglass. So there's a hashtag for it.
You might have mentioned that I didn't hear it. Where do you teach?
CCAD, fashion design. Woohoo! We have a great program. We have a great team. Any questions? Anything else anybody wants to know about this felting?
I must have asked you before, Judy, but I do think that I would love you to share your experience to our audience here today. So a year ago, you are making this small little dolls and all that. What does it feel like making this doll, and how does it compare to making those bowls that's so much larger and it's a lot more physically involved? How would you characterize that? Would you call that a evolution of your artistic, or you develop it from one to another? How do you see the connection between the two, making these dolls and making the bowl?
I think it's definitely an evolution, and I was like Matisse, for instance. He was making all these complicated paintings, and at the end of his life, he's just making a shape, and that's good enough, So I think that's pretty much the direction I'm going in. One of the things that after my kids moved out of the house and other details started to settle down in my life, aging woman at this time of our history. Looking forward to not taking care of people. I had to figure out how to do all that kind of thing because I'd been taking care of people my whole life, and then suddenly everybody's gone and saying, I don't need you to do that anymore. What do? So I used art to go through that process. And one of the things I noticed during that process was I was working very close and just analyzing the very, just this much space as I was working. And this also is just, I just would get on here and take my glasses off, and I'd be looking really close to the area that I'm working on in the moment, right? And then I start working on these bowls, and there are no rules because I have no idea what I'm doing. And just kind of seeing what happens, and they're all the same. They all start out the same size. They don't end up the same size, but they all start out the same size, and they just sort of took on a life of their own and evolved into something that's not required. There's no requirement of me to look at it very closely and understand the deeper meaning. There's no requirement to show off technique, because do you know anybody who's done this before? I don't, but that doesn't mean nobody's done anything like it. It's just I don't know anybody who's done it, so I'm making this up.
Yeah. I was just reading a little bit about making felt, and on the regular, it's woven, not felt. I mean, regular fabric is woven. It said felt is pressed together.
Yes. Well, Felt is actually an
Judy,
entanglement.
do you want to repeat what you said?
Oh,
Thank
he
you.
was looking up some what felting really was. And he said, well, woven is yarns that are woven together in order to create a structure over and under a yarn, a preceding or next yarn or whatever. And the felting, he said he read, it was pressed together. Well, that's true. That's what I do. I stand over it and I press it together just to get the moisture and the soap into the fiber. But at that action of pressing really opens up the fiber and entangles them mechanically, so they can't come untangled. If you looked at a fiber of wool under a microscope, it would sort of look like the top of an asparagus plant, you know, the stalk that you eat. Mm-hmm. And when you add heat and moisture to that fiber, those cuticles are called opened up. And when you have it next to another fiber, like fiber, whose cuticles are opening up, those cuticles intertwine, and when they connect, they can no longer be separated. So it's permanent. So all these commercials that you're seeing these days for how to get the felting out of your sweater, I don't know what that's about, because I can't get felting out, and I work with it every day, right? So, yes, ma'am.
Do you have any control at all over the felting process?
Oh, yeah. I have a lot of control.
Judy's out of control.
What?
I'm saying, like, when you get it wet, it just does its thing.
Well, though you can see I have designs in some of these. So I have a good amount of control over what happens. So like this bowl has all the stars in it again, and these, they're pre-felted, and I stick them into the space, and then by just gently pressing on them, it is a pressing, but it's an entanglement at the same time. Gently pressing on it, then I can get those to combine. But again, I use really, really, really hot water, because like just a few presses will felt it. But I have to wear gloves because it's too hot for my hands. So it's pretty good because it takes away a lot of the physical part of the work. In the giant felted bowls, that'll be here at the opening, they're like this big around, and they're like they shrink to 33% approximately. It could shrink a lot more than that or a lot less than that, depending on how much you felt it. But I mean, it's like 8 pounds, and then you add water to that, it gets to be at like 100 pounds. And I gotta flip it around and move it around if you're adding that much water. Well, I've learned how not to work that hard, so, because I went to take some felting classes, right? So over time, I've learned how not to do that, and so hopefully I can make the next one without so much physical work. But you add water to anything, and it's heavy. These are only 3 layers of wool. My felted bowls are 6 to 8 layers of wool, so they get, you know, exponentially more absorbent and absorb more water. So these are easy to manage because they're little, they're lightweight. I can absorb the water from them easily using an absorbent towel and move along. But the bigger ones are, the big bowls that you get into are, you know, a lot more work.
Get wet.
They have to be remolded. The gelatin and the gelatin hardener stays in, but it's really hard to get it out. But they have to just be remolded. So, as a matter of fact, I took some of these before the show and remolded them. This one right here, it didn't look like that. So I remolded it before the show, and now it looks like that. Yes, Barbara.
This is Alice's comment, but I mean, the palettes are so similar. But what's nice about this show, I think, is you have geometric square and then round. You know, it's just, you know, kind of an interesting observation. Yeah, yeah.
We talked about that too, the organic nature of my work and the square, hard edge nature of a painting in general. You know, and then Michael has geometric patterns in his that he's interested in exploring. So
that observation is coming from 3 amazing artists.
Alice Carpenter.
Art Vogel.
Sue Kavanaugh. Wonderful. So, do you know each other?
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful.
Sue and I used to be in an art group a couple of years ago. It was only 3 of us. And I credit that group with really giving me confidence and growing. Because before that, I was just a sniveling baby. I don't think that's too far
I
off.
understand your evolution to the big stuff, but I hope you never give up this little stuff that makes people
Oh, it makes me smile too. It's like, you know, and my
Never
son,
give up the little stuff.
my son, I think I've mentioned, he lives in Los Angeles, so I don't get to see his kids very much. But I asked him if I could send his daughter a doll, you know, because I have to ask him because his view on the world is a little different than mine. And so he says to me, yeah, but you can't send any of the crazy one. It has to look like a normal doll, right? right? Well, wait, there's an end to this story. So now when I talk to my granddaughter on the phone, we don't just sit and talk. We play games. We take tours of what's going on in my neighborhood, or, you know, so what do you do with a 2-year-old, you know? You only have limited attention span, so I want as much of her attention as I can get. And I take her on a tour of my dolls, and she loves them. She laughs at them, you know, so.
You were remarking about
he doesn't
how
know.
to care for, and you are caring for your grandchildren with your art.
Oh.
How wonderful.
Don't we all do that?
What a legacy.
Don't all artists
what a
do
legacy.
That? That's who we are.
Judy, thank you. This was marvelous.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and Eliza, how it is that you came to know Judy is a real gift to us, because didn't it just come together, if I can say, like a work of art?
Oh, yeah.
Please give our best to Michael Halliday, and we'll see him the day of the groundhog, February 2nd, 6 to 8 here, as we've rescheduled the opening. And we won't know whether we'll have 6 more weeks of winter or not. We won't even care. This will be so beautiful surrounding us.
What choice do we have?
What choice do we have? Well, thank you.